This Snazzy Tapier production is made possible by our patrons. If you'd like to join them, head over to patreon.com/snazzytapier to get early access to new episodes, access to the members-only Discord, and our exclusive monthly newsletter. Now, on with the show. Hello and welcome to A Game of One's Own, a podcast all about solo and duet role-playing games. I'm your host, Maddy, my pronouns are they, them, and today I'm playing Why We Fight, a solo plus game by Stop, Drop and Roll, who have also kindly sponsored this episode. At time of release, Why We Fight is crowdfunding on BackerKit, so if you enjoyed today's episode, please go and check out the campaign and consider backing the game yourself. In this game, I'll be playing a crew of 4 characters who are part of the Community Alliance, seeking to rebuild the world after the collapse of society. This union of settlements stands against the oppressive forces that seek to control and exploit those who remain. These forces include the Guiding Hand, fronted by multi-billionaire Jordan Forst, who have taken control of all radio and television stations. They are joined by the White Fist, who serve as militaristic quote-unquote guardians of the protectorates, steel-walled compounds that promise safety for the price of labour. Before we begin, this episode includes some sensitive topics and themes. If you need more information, there are content warnings in the show notes, as there are for every episode of the show. Let me introduce you to the crew I will be playing today. At the beginning of the game, each of my 4 characters is given a name and a few descriptors as a starting point. They all start with a recurve bow, arrows, and a light melee weapon of the player's choice. They also get a specialty, something they excel at and can use to help the team survive. First up, Pax Uluo is a black woman with purple-dyed hair and tired eyes. Her specialty is navigation. She can always spot the best way forward and turn any situation into an advantageous one. Next up, Jem Kingsley is a white non-binary person with a prosthetic leg who always has a book in their hand. Their specialty is technical. They can fix any mechanical object. Our third crew member, Daniel Navarro, is a Latino man with a bushy beard and hearing aids. His specialty is morale. His soothing voice keeps everyone in good spirits. Last but not least, Susan Gao is a British Chinese woman who has a toned physique and an infectious laugh. Her specialty is athletics. She's strong, fast, and good in a fight. I also need to invent a personality discovery for one of my characters. This should be something that the crew learns about this character by spending time together. I'm going to say that Susan dreams of creating a peaceful community garden, but only when she feels her work with the crew is done. Now it's time to determine the crew's mission. I rolled a 3, so my crew's mission is to shut down a broadcast station. I also need to decide how many areas the crew has to travel through to reach the mission. For this game, I'm going to say they need to travel through 2 areas. According to my dice rolls, these areas will be in a city and suburbia. In each area, the crew will encounter a situation that they must deal with. Before the crew sets off on their journey, I'll give a quick overview of how some of the main mechanics of the game work. When a character attempts an action, they are not attempting it alone, but are leading the crew to accomplish it. The player chooses the specialty the character is using, and if the action they are attempting is particularly difficult, they may need to subtract a difficulty modifier from the result. The player rolls 2d6 to determine whether an action is a failure on a 5 or below, a partial success on a 6 to 9, or a full success on a 10+. On a failure, the player must choose a result from a list of consequences. If both dice land on the same number, this is counted as a double. If a double is rolled and the roll is a success, the action is counted as succeeding twice. However, rolling a double on a failed roll means that the player must choose 2 consequences for failure instead of 1. Personality discoveries and local area discoveries can be used to add an extra die to the player's roll, while hardships activated during combat give a character a -1 penalty to any roll they are leading until they are soothed. I will also be tracking the passage of time as my crew members travel, as different times of day confer bonuses to different specialties, and travelling too long without sleep gives characters a penalty to their rolls. For the purposes of this episode, instead of recording how I interact with dice rolls and so on, I'm going to be writing the events that unfold as a third-person narrative, but the mechanics I have described will still be driving the story I create. Now, without further ado, here's the first part of my playthrough of Why We Fight. The crew set off as soon as it was light, leaving the community-aligned settlement of Bluebell Ridge for the patchwork sprawl of the city. Their destination was on the outskirts, beyond the city's suburban districts. But first, they had to navigate the winding streets and wide plazas of the city centre. As Pax led Jem, Daniel and Susan along one of the main thoroughfares, something caught Jem's eye. A towering multi-storey car park loomed ahead, but instead of being crammed with gas-guzzling vehicles, it now housed a bustling market. On the roof, Jem took particular notice of the dozen or so small windmills, which provided power to the market below. This brought to mind the first windmill they had installed at Bluebell Ridge several years before. They had always been fascinated with how things work, often poring over engineering manuals the way their friends did with comics. They couldn't help but smile as the windmill spun in the breeze. Jem's reverie was soon interrupted by the squeal of tyres. Pax turned her attention away from her map and immediately spotted the White Fist supply truck speeding towards them. As the crew ducked into an alleyway, they watched in horror as the truck stopped right in front of the market, and troopers began brandishing weapons at the stall holders. Terrified, one of the stall holders handed over their goods, a few crates of fresh fruit. "We have to do something," whispered Daniel. Pax, Jem and Susan nodded in agreement. "I have an idea," Jem whispered back. The crew crept towards the truck, trying to stay out of sight of the troopers. They managed to slash the tyres, preventing the truck from escaping with the stolen goods, but before they could back away, a formidable trooper with a grenade launcher spotted them crouched by the wheels. "Hey, what the fuck are you doing down there?" Susan leapt up and drew her bow, with the others following suit. An arrow struck their target, and the grenadier fell to his knees, but one of the troopers stationed at the market entrance heard his cry of pain and dashed forward, shooting Susan in the shoulder with his pistol. Spotting a collapsed brick wall nearby, Daniel ushered the crew into cover, and Pax drew her bow to lead another volley of arrows. The trooper staggered and fell, an arrow lodged in his stomach. Jem ducked back behind the collapsed wall and pulled a bandage out of their bag, wrapping it securely around Susan's shoulder. Meanwhile, 2 troopers emerged from the market carrying crates of food and clothing. They quickly shoved the crates into the truck and drew their pistols. Another White Fist soldier with a rifle accompanied them, scanning the area. Spotting her fallen ally, the soldier grabbed one of his dropped grenades and threw it at the collapsed wall. The remains of the wall crumbled into rubble and dust, leaving the crew without cover. Daniel charged at one of the troopers by the truck and delivered a decisive blow with his hand axe. The trooper crumpled at his feet, while the rest of the crew stormed into the fray. As he watched the trooper's eyes glaze over, Daniel was suddenly a child again, watching as his best friend was cut down by a raider. He shook off the terror and nausea as best he could and turned his attention to the remaining soldiers. Not now, he thought desperately. Only 2 looters left. We can do this, Pax told herself. She thrust her combat knife at the one with the rifle, but missed her target, giving her enemy the opportunity to send a spray of bullets at Jem. Jem was badly hurt, but still standing. Pax slashed with her knife again, to no avail. She tried to dodge more incoming fire, but a bullet thudded into her thigh. She let out a scream of pain and frustration. "Leave us alone!" Daniel took his cue from Pax and yelled, "We've taken out 3 of you, and now you're outnumbered. Do you really want to take your chances?" The 2 remaining White Fist troopers glanced at their fallen allies, and at the slashed tyres of the supply truck, then at each other. Without a word, they ran away from the market, leaving the bodies of their friends and the crates of supplies behind. Daniel let out a deep sigh and wiped his hand axe on his shirt. Then he rushed over to his wounded friends and tried to help patch them up. A few people from the market hurried outside to help. Noticing that Daniel's hands were shaking as he unravelled some bandages, Pax put her hand on his shoulder. "Hey, buddy, it's okay. We did it. You were brilliant." Her smile, perhaps because it was rare, was especially radiant. Daniel paused, took a long breath, and said, "Yes, I suppose I was." That's all we have time for this week, but you can tune in next time to find out what happens to Pax, Jem, Daniel and Susan in the conclusion of this playthrough of Why We Fight. If you want to back the game on BackerKit and try it for yourself, or learn more about Stop, Drop and Roll's amazing work, there are links in the podcast description. Thanks again to Stop, Drop and Roll for sponsoring this episode. Thank you for listening to this episode of A Game of One's Own. Our theme music, as always, is by James Barbarossa, and this week's episode also included music by Kevin MacLeod. If you'd like to support the show, head over to patreon.com/snazzytapier for all the bonus goodies. You can follow the show on social media at A Game of One's Own, and find out more about my work at snazzytapier.com or at Maddy is Abstract on social media. See you next time for more weird stories.